We're in the time period known as the 3 weeks, which is a time when we are mourning over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the fact that we still find ourselves in Galus and without the Beis HaMikdash. And there are many rules that apply during these 3 weeks, and lots of do's and don'ts, more don'ts than do's. And often I feel like it's presented as, here's a whole list of things and go try to remember it. And what I would like to try to do today is to go through the rules, but to try and do it in a little bit more of a systematic way and explaining a little bit more of the background and where different things come from. And that way, hopefully, it sort of registers in a more cohesive way. Perhaps we should start with the do's, of course, and the Rabbi encourages us to use the opportunity to do more do's than don'ts, right? So we have to study the laws of the Beis HaMikdash from the Rambam and from the Mishnayos, and then later on, as we get into the time of the 9 days, to make siyumim, to increase as much as possible in holy Torah and permissible forms of celebration. Some housekeeping notes. Next week there will most likely not be a class. It's actually going to be the Hanachas Tefillin of David Werbler. So there will be a breakfast celebration, but I'm fairly certain that I will not be in town. And then the following Sunday there will be a class, but just not this class. It will be for men and women. Everybody is very strongly encouraged to come and bring their wives and whoever else is important in their life. It's all going to be about after 120 for oneself, but also for parents, family members, etc. Very important class, and everybody should make it a priority to be here. And so I imagine the week after that, I don't see why there shouldn't be a class. In fact, I think the week after that may be a class, I think it's that week, maybe a class associated with the Hanachas Tefillin of Benzi. I'm not sure if that's that week or the week after, but we'll have to look at the calendar. Okay. Now, sorry. There's of course the day of Tisha B'Av itself, which is a day which not only do we fast, but there's many things that are forbidden on that day itself. We don't wash our hands. We pretty much don't engage in anything that's not, we don't go to work. It's pretty much don't engage in anything that's not directly associated with Tisha B'Av. Today's class, I do not plan to talk too much about Tisha B'Av. And then, working backwards, the stages are the Erev Tisha B'Av. That means on Erev Tisha B'Av, the day before Tisha B'Av, there's a stronger stringency, I guess, more strict about a lot of these things. Then you have Shavua Shechal B'Ei Tisha B'Av, the week within which Tisha B'Av falls. So that would be starting from the Saturday night, the Motzei Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Moving back, you have from Rosh Chodesh Av, with the first day of Av, which is from then until after Tisha B'Av, which is called the 9 days. It's actually 9.5 days, because the mourning period of the 9 days, for the most part, extends until midday on the day after Tisha B'Av. So on the midday of the 10th of Av. Although this year there are some leniencies in that regard because it's Friday, so certain things will be, which are in a normal year not allowed until the afternoon of the 10th of Av, will be permissible this year already from immediately after the fast in honor of Shabbos, and we'll get there soon. And then we have all the way back from Tisha B'Av B'Tammuz, referring to the 3 weeks. Now, the Gemara says, this is the Gemara in Yevamis, Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph 43a, Shabbos Shechal Tisha B'Av Shechal Tisha B'Av Teicha. The Shabbos in this case doesn't mean Shabbos; it means a week. Right? So the week in which Tisha B'Av falls, also l'saper l'chabes. It's forbidden to have a haircut, or l'chabes, and to launder clothing. On Thursday it would be permissible because of Yana of Shabbos. V'tanya, we also studied in a brayso that koydem hazman zeh, before this time, in other words, earlier than the week in which Tisha B'Av falls. People diminish in their business dealings from buying and selling, from building and planting. One may betroth but not marry. Now, betrothing is something that doesn't really exist nowadays on its own. In halacha, there are two stages to the marriage. The first is betrothal, which is accomplished by giving of the ring, which means that the woman is considered to be 100% designated to this man and would not be allowed to marry any other man without receiving a get, etc. But she's still not permissible to marry that person. And then the second stage is nisuin, which is the actual marriage, which includes the chuppah, the yichud, the sheva brachas, and all of that. Nowadays, both of those things are always done on the same day in the same ceremony. Once upon a time, the first thing was done some time before, so it was permissible to betroth in the 9 days, but not, well, it doesn't say here 9 days, it just says sometime before the week of Tisha B'Av. But even if a person does betroth in that time, we do not make a party, a meal associated with that betrothal. So what we've seen here is that there's the prohibitions that apply within the week of Tisha B'Av, and then that there's also some prohibitions that are kept from some time before that, but it doesn't say how much time. Now there's a pasuk in Eicha, in the book of Eicha, Lamentations, where it says, it's in chapter 1, verse 3, the third chapter in the book, all her pursuers, her is referring to Jerusalem, all her pursuers caught her between the strains, between the strains. But the Medrash says that this thing of Bein HaMetzarim, between the strains, refers to B'yoyim da'aka, in the days of sorrow, Mishiva Asar Tammuz at Tisha B'Av, from the 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. So Bein HaMetzarim literally is referring to the sort of the place where they were caught, but the Medrash says that it's actually referring to the time between the 17th of Tammuz, the significance of the 17th of Tammuz, besides it being historically a significant day, that's the day where the luchos were broken in the past. But in the story of the destruction, that was the day in which, on the second temple, the Romans breached the wall. So the Medrash, even though Eicha is written after the first destruction, but the Medrash, which by the first destruction the wall was breached on the 9th of Tammuz, as we discussed in previous years. But nevertheless, the Medrash associates this Bein HaMetzarim period between these days of sorrows, which and the Medrash says the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, and hence we have this notion of the 3 weeks. One explicit source for mourning for 3 weeks connected with the Beis Hamikdash comes from Daniel chapter Yud Beis, chapter 10, verse 2 and 3, where it says, "By Yom Mahim, in those days, I Daniel I was Shvuim Yomim. I Daniel was mourning for 3 weeks. Lechem chamudish le'achalti, I didn't eat this tasty bread. Basov yayin le'val pi, no meat or wine entered my mouth. I didn't anoint myself until 3 weeks were complete." So already there we have a very early source for there being a 3-week mourning period. So based on all of this, the fact that we have the Gemara saying, one second, and there's one more, of course, very important Gemara that has to be mentioned, which I believe is famous, is Mishanichnas Av B'Matin B'Simcha. The other half of that Gemara is more famous, Mishanichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha. When the month of Adar comes in, we increase in joy. But the other half is that Mishanichnas Av, when the month of Av begins, we decrease in joy. So putting all of this together, that brings us with all these different time periods where we have certain prohibitions that apply in the week of Tisha B'Av, and then the Gemara also tells us that certain things are forbidden already before that. So some things are extended to not just to the week of Tisha B'Av, but to the whole 9 days, and some things are extended even more than that for the entire 3 weeks. In general, this is kind of the way I've presented it, is the Ashkenazi approach. For the Sfardim, Most of the things only apply within the weekend of Tisha B'Av. Some things they do already for the whole, what we call the 9 days, from the Rosh Chodesh, from the 1st of Av. And I don't think they have any specific restrictions during the first half of the 3 weeks, from the 17th of Tammuz until the 1st of Av. But today we're just going to talk the Ashkenazi halacha and minhag.
Well, that's what Chabad follows, right?
Yeah, that's because most Lubavitchers are Ashkenazim.
Not
Okay.
the ones from Rapoport, they're Yemenites.
Yeah, so maybe they have different minhagim, I don't know. Okay. Now, so I should mention, the Gemara, one of the things that the Gemara said was forbidden already before this time, and then again, it didn't say specifically when, is marriage. Marriage is forbidden. Now, when we say marriage is forbidden, but it says betrothal is permitted. Now, nowadays we don't have betrothal, but we do have engagement parties, which which is not the same as a betrothal suda, but the Gemara says if you do betrothal, you don't have a suda, you don't have the feast. So it is brought down in the Paskim that if a person does have an engagement in the 9 days, already going all the way back to Rosh Chodesh Av, not just, then it should be done with less of a task, less of a fanfare
Yeah.
that you would otherwise. Now, everybody knows that, quote, we don't listen to music in the 3 weeks. Now, where does this come from? What's this idea of not listening to music? Now, in Halach in the Paskim, the prohibition against listening to music is an offshoot of this idea of marriage. We don't make weddings, and one of the characteristics of weddings is usually music and dancing, and so kind of as an offshoot of that, we also don't listen to music during this period, and again, the Ashkenazi minhag applies that for the entirety of the 3 weeks. Now, the truth is that in the Gemara it says that you're never allowed to listen to music. One of the things that's prohibited after the Churban Beis HaMikdash is that year-round we should never listen to music. And indeed, there are poskim, famously Rabbi Feinstein, who really held that this has to be enforced, and a frum Jew should never listen to music except for a wedding or another simcha shel mitzvah, a mitzvah-related celebration. But the fact is that by and large, the Jewish community as a whole is lenient in this regard. There could be many reasons why to be lenient. For example, some poskim hold that the prohibition against music is only to actual live music, but nowadays we all listen to recorded music. Now, conceptually that's a difficult distinction to be made, especially nowadays where the quality of recorded music is pretty much the same, if not sometimes better than live music, and even you go to sometimes fancy weddings and they don't even have live music, they just have a DJ. But nevertheless, that does remain one of the bases that people rely on to be mekel. But so it is what it is, so to speak. But perhaps one way of approaching the whole idea that for 3 weeks we don't listen to music is not just like, the whole year I listen to music, but now I'm restricted. But it's kind of a little bit the other way around. Really, we should never listen to music. The rest of the year, we make a concession for whatever reason, and we're lenient, nowadays, because it's recorded, or because nowadays in general, people need more music, people are anxious, and it helps them, whatever approach you want to take. And it's like for these 3 weeks, we're going back to how it ought to be. This is the way it ought to be, and in the time where we're focused on mourning for the Beis HaMikdash, so we go back to how it ought to be year-round. So I think it's just a little bit of a perspective shift to understand the prohibition of listening to music as to being really...
Could you be a little bit more specific about the definition of music?
Yes, I'm getting to that. So, I want to say something about a cappella, because a cappella is a new fad, which basically is people creating all sorts of effects, sound effects, which are designed to sound like music, and the more professional they're getting over the years, the more it actually does sound very much like music. And they're basically making all sorts of beats and sounds with their mouths, and then in the studio you change it up, and however they do it, and then they produce something which is called a cappella music. Now, I don't know that I could say that it's strictly forbidden to listen to a cappella music in the 3 weeks. But I can say, and I do say, that it really rubs me the wrong way. In other words, you're trying to outsmart the system. It's more than outsmart the system. It's like you don't really get the message. In other words, okay, I have a checklist. I'm supposed to not listen to music, so I'm going to continue doing what I always do, and not let this thing in. And I have a smart way to not allow this prohibition of music to inconvenience me. So I got my music. I have my routine. I like listening to music. And I'm just going to continue doing it, so it won't be, the best quality music. It'll be second to best quality music. But, I don't know, to me, the whole thing is antithetical to the whole idea of not listening to music in the 3 weeks. There are other albums which I've recorded, which it's not a cappella. Again, I'm not sure exactly what the word a cappella means. That's just how it's used. But there are albums you could get which are just people singing. There's no background music. It's just people singing. And that, I think that there's much more room to. It's not music. You just listen to people singing, and certainly if it's slow songs, because if you remember, the whole idea over here is that we're not. It's an offshoot of weddings. What's the idea of weddings? It's not the it's the dance music. The idea of a wedding is the dance music. So slow music in general, there would be a strong basis to say that there's no problem at all to listen to slow music during the 3 weeks. Lamaisa, I believe the broadly accepted custom is to avoid all music at all, even slow music during the 3 weeks. But certainly if it's just people singing without music, and it's slow songs, not songs that are the dance type of songs, I don't see any problem with it at all. Certainly not during the 3 weeks. Maybe if you're getting closer to the 9 days and the week of Tisha B'Av, you want to. It's sort of there are actually sources to avoid singing at all during the 9 days. There's actually from the Rebbe also something that implies that. So then maybe not. But during the 3 weeks, I don't think there's any problem listening to just people singing slow songs without music and without any fake music. I don't see any problem with that. If a person listens to music, first of all, if a person is driving and needs to keep himself awake, listen to whatever you want, listen to dance music, just as long as you don't fall asleep at the wheel. Also, some people exercise or do things like that, and they need background music.
Energy.
Yeah, sorry?
Like in a form of energy. It energizes you to listen to music.
Yeah, well, it keeps you distracted, whatever it is, that's not a problem. You're not listening to music to dance, you're listening to music for a health reason, to exercise, and you need something in the background to keep you distracted or to help you keep up with your rhythm of your thing. That's not a problem. Again, as you get closer to the week of Tisha B'Av, if it doesn't feel right, there's a little bit of some degree of subjectivity over there. But again, that's not the idea. Is we don't make weddings, and just like we don't dance at weddings, we don't do other things that are connected to dancing. If you're sitting in the gym and you need something in the background, of course, if you're able to concentrate on a Shir Torah while you're in the gym and listen to actually something of value where you could learn Chassidus or Halacha, whatever it is, then that's nothing to do with the 3 weeks. That's in general, that's definitely better advised. But if the way you exercise, if the way it works for you is with music, then I don't think that has to be changed. If you have young children who need to be entertained, and if they're younger than the age of chinuch, which 5, 6, 7, young kids, then it's okay to put on music for them, and whatever, you don't pay too much attention. You don't have to sort of plug up your ears. Okay, I mentioned already before that the minhag is that on Tisha B'Av itself, not to do any singing, and some might apply this in general for the whole week of Tisha B'Av, or even to the 9 days. Now, in general,
You can't sing.
yeah, there is such an idea. Not on Shabbos; it wouldn't apply on Shabbos, but yeah.
Okay.
Now, in general, I should mention there's an interesting, somewhat of an innovative approach to this whole thing from Rav J.B. Soloveitchik, the Rav, where he says that these 3 periods, the week of Tisha B'Av, the 9 days, and the 3 weeks, correspond to the 3 time periods in mourning when a person loses a parent, where you have the week of Shiva, and the month of Shloshim, the first 30 days, and then the 12 months. And he draws a number of halachic, conclusions based on that. It's not, Rav Soloveitchik's shita is not widely accepted. Many poskim do not agree with it. But I would want to point out that according to Rav Soloveitchik, the prohibition during the 3 weeks is not only against music, but it's against any sibas mireus, against any gathering of any social events. If a person in the 12th month of Avelus, 12 months of mourning for a parent, doesn't go to any social get-togethers, So according to Rav Soloveitchik, the same would apply for the 3 weeks. So, for example, I would assume that according to Rav Soloveitchik, nobody should you shouldn't make any engagement parties during the 3 weeks. I would think.
It cuts both ways with him.
Yeah, with him there are some things that are more strict and some things that are
shaving.
more lenient. Yeah, he's more lenient about. We'll get to that soon. Yes.
So the delineation here that you're making is that if there's a connection to weddings, dancing, etc., happiness, really, that's why the music is prohibited. But what about solemn music?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, solemn music, that doesn't really mean any reason to forbid it. But
Classical, for example.
Yeah, but the custom has become that we avoid all music at all. Again, yeah. Okay.
Is there any kind of progression in the stringency as you go through this period from the start, 17th of Tammuz to the 9 days to the week before? Because I know when it comes to haircuts.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to haircuts.
How about with regards to music?
Yeah, so like I said, like in the 9 days and certainly the week of Tisha B'Av, there are sources that suggest one shouldn't do any singing at all. Not just music. You shouldn't sing. So yeah, certainly the closer you get, so to speak, the more. And again, it's hard to say sort of a very strict recipe of on this day you could listen to this song, and the next day you have to go to a different song. But it's the vibe. Sort of the atmosphere is that as you get closer to the 9 days in the week of Tisha B'Av and Tisha B'Av itself, you cut back even more on any of these type of things which are considered distractions from focusing on the morning.
So we make that determination, is what you're suggesting.
What I'm suggesting,
If we cut back,
I'm suggesting that there is
we feel we should cut back.
I'm suggesting that there is a degree of subjectivity. Yes. Okay.
Believe me, if you listen to me singing, there will be lots of money. Just buy my album.
David Yehuda, are you allowed to make jokes in the 3 weeks? Okay. Now, haircuts. So the Gemara said.
I think self-deprecating jokes are permitted during the 3 weeks.
So the Gemara says that it's forbidden to have hair. Forbidden also l'saper. One of the prohibitions was to have a haircut, and that was during the week of Tisha B'Av itself. Right? Ashkenazi practice is that we bring this all the way back to the 3 weeks. Now. So here's before we mention the stringency that emerges from Rav Soloveitchik's approach, there's also a leniency. And the leniency is that during the 12 months of mourning, the prohibition against haircuts is only until you look disheveled. Right? During the week of Shiva and the month of Shloshim, you're not allowed to have any haircuts at all. But in the 12 months, if you look disheveled, you can have actually, one second. I recently had a member of our community who's in the year of Avelus, and he had very long hair, and I figured, the way I know him, that he's probably just waiting, because the lashon halacha is actually yigaru b'chaverim, until his friends reprimand him, like, no, go take care of yourself. So I said to him, would you consider, like I just randomly said to him, would you consider me a friend? So he looked at me like, what? So I said, go get a haircut. And he said, thank you, I've been waiting for weeks for somebody to tell me that. And he came back to me the next day to thank me again. He said, I've been waiting for a haircut, and nobody said anything to me, and he was waiting for this halacha that somebody should yigar b'chavera.
Was he married?
What?
Was he married?
Yes, but... all right. Anyway,
my impression of Rav Soloveitchik's sheet on this.
1 second. Let me first say what his shit is. Yeah. So Rav Soloveitchik says. So what about shaving? So I don't know if a Chabad rabbi should be talking about shaving, but okay. So those people who shave. So some people shave every day or every other day. and as soon as if they don't shave for more than a couple of days, then they look quote unquote disheveled. Now, in the week of Shiva or Shloshim, it's too bad because you're not allowed to have any haircuts. But during the 12 months, they can continue shaving regularly because they look disheveled. So if you apply Rav Soloveitchik's parallel over here, the 3 weeks correspond to the 12 months. So according to Rav Soloveitchik, for somebody who shaves regularly would be allowed to continue shaving up until the 9 days, and even within the 9 days, there may be room to allow them to shave L'Kavod Shabbos, on Erev Shabbos. So that's before we mentioned the stringency according to Rav Soloveitchik. This is a leniency. I should point out that again, not everybody accepts this. Rav Moshe Feinstein does allow a person to shave in the 3 weeks for the need of parnasa, but he cautions very strongly that don't confuse your discomfort and embarrassment with parnasa. In other words, the fact that you're going to show up to work and people are going to be looking at you and you're going to be uncomfortable, that's not a heter to shave. If you're going for a work interview and you think that you're not going to get the job because they're going to think that you don't know that you're disheveled, then that would be a basis to be made, because that's not just about your personal feelings of embarrassment, that's an objective parnasa thing. So it's important to be honest, and if the shayla is relevant to you, discuss it with a rabbi. Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the concept of ad ve'ad bechlal and ad ve'lo ad bechlal, right? So
How's
it says
that
ad sheyigrala chavero, right? So it feels like I feel like Rav Soloveitchik is saying that you don't really have to get to the point.
Yeah, strictly speaking, you don't have to actually wait for somebody to come and tell you. As long as your hair is long enough that if your friends weren't polite, they would tell you, then that's fine. But here, I haven't sort of researched it what the mucker is, but there must be some source that you should actually wait until somebody tells you. And I could tell this is a guy who's usually quite put together. And it just didn't make sense to me that his hair was so long, and I realized he's probably waiting for somebody to tell him. So I told him, and he very much appreciated it.
Well, the makor is the Shulchan Aruch, right, on Yud Beis Chodesh.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Right? That's the lashon.
Yeah, we have to look at all the achronim. If anyone, I'm sure
he-
if you're looking for the chumrah, I'm sure you'll find somebody who says that it's better to wait until somebody tells you.
It's just that it's his MO very often not to look disheveled. That's Rav Soloveitchik was very into that. And so he had that same opinion about shaving during Chol HaMoed.
He allowed shaving the chol
I think yes, as long as you shave before.
Yeah.
And then he would say, "What are you, a savage?" It would be like you should never look like.
It's interesting because he himself didn't shave. He trimmed, but he didn't shave.
Well, over here and over here, like he had certain spots that he made sure to look. But the idea was, as a Jew, you got to look presentable.
Okay.
Rabbi, I've been asked to ask you a question that's related to hair, and it is: can a woman dye her hair during the 3 weeks?
Can a woman dye her hair during the 3 weeks?
Why not?
I don't.
That's a tricky question, my friend.
I don't see why not.
It's a different thing. It's not brought down.
I don't see why not. I would say in the 9 days in the 9 days I could see, again, it's hard to say something like that is strictly prohibited, but basically in the 9 days, we're going to get to it, but in the 9 days, it's more of the vibe like, don't engage in any activity that's
Beautification.
That's vanity.
that's a luxury.
Beautification.
You're allowed to clean your house because you're allowed to sweep your floor and mop your floors because you don't need to live in a dirt thing, but don't paint your walls. Because painting your walls is a distraction from the Churban, and you could wait till the next week. Sweeping your floor could also be a distraction, but that's okay because we don't need you to live in a dirty house. So there, I can already see, like, okay, so dye your hair the next week. Yes.
Wait a minute, though. Doesn't a woman cover her head?
Well, first of all,
So why is the question of dyeing her hair significant? She's supposed to cover her hair.
even if she covers her hair, she's still allowed to want to dye it.
But younger unmarried women like to highlight and
Oh,
change color.
unmarried women.
Okay. Now, if a woman has, what about now the prohibition against haircuts in the 3 weeks? Batsim applies to hair all over the body, not just the hair of the face. However, for women, first of all, if there's any hair that's protruding from their sheitel or tichel, which needs to be cut, that's certainly allowed. And even the hair of the rest of the body, many poskim allow it. Certainly, if it's a married woman and it's relevant to her intimate life, so certainly poskim are matir it. And certainly, if it's got to do with preparation to go to mikvah, even if the mikveh itself is after Tisha B'Av, but the custom is not to cut the hair within the few days prior, to do it a few days earlier than that. So anything connected with preparation to mikveh is certainly forbidden. It's certainly permissible. Also, it's permissible for a woman to cut her sheitel during the 3 weeks. Not during the 9 days, but during the 3 weeks, it's permissible to cut your sheitel because it's cutting your. It's not her hair. Now, like I mentioned earlier, usually the prohibition against haircuts extends all the way until the afternoon after Tisha B'Av. But this year, because it's Friday, so you could have a haircut immediately after Tisha B'Av, even on Thursday night, because as long as you're doing it l'kavod Shabbos, then that's allowed. Okay. Moving on to Shechayanu. Now, so here, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding or thing when it comes to this. I want to clarify this. The prohibition against engaging in things to do with, in other words, the idea that you don't engage in anything extra because it's a distraction from the churban, that is only in the 9 days. So the prohibition against buying or engaging in things doesn't apply during the 3 weeks. So Narvas goes like this. It's brought down in the Maharil, and it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch, that a person should try to avoid saying Shechayanu in the 3 weeks. Why should you avoid saying Shechayanu in the 3 weeks? Because what does the bracha of Shechayanu say? Shechayanu v'kimonu v'gyanu lizman hazeh, that we're thanking Hashem for bringing us to this time. This is not a good time. So it's not really the problem with whatever you're doing, it's the problem with the words Shechayanu lizman hazeh. Even the Maharil himself says it's only Shechayanu which cannot be done which can be done afterwards. So if there's a reason to say Shechayanu right now, for example, if a person has a pidyon haben, or a person has a baby daughter, or even it's brought in the pasuk, if a person has a new fruit, but that new fruit is not going to be available anymore after the 3 weeks, he's allowed to say Shechayanu. But if it's not necessary to do it now and it can be pushed off, so then you should not say Shechayanu. There's a machlokus in the paskim whether or not this to avoid say Shechayanu applies on Shabbos during the 3 weeks, and in practice, certainly the Chabad minhag is to be strict about that based on the Arizal. I believe, if I recall correctly, the Mishnah Berurah is also machmir about that. Now, because we don't say Shechayanu, so therefore the minhag further developed that you don't buy new clothing during the 3 weeks, because clothing, not any clothing, but clothing that are significant, again, it's hard to define exactly, but a suit or an expensive hat or something, an expensive item of clothing, one says Shechayanu when one buys it, at least in theory, and not just clothing. The same is true if you buy a new car or a new piece of furniture that's important to you. All of these things are, you say Shechayanu. So therefore you don't do any of them, those things during the 3 weeks. Now, the minhag further developed that even though nowadays many people do not say Shechayanu when they buy a new couch or a new suit, but nevertheless, the minhag remained that you don't buy those things during the 3 weeks because, at least in theory, it warrants a Shechayanu. And so, one second, and so the takeaway is that we don't buy or wear new clothing during the 3 weeks, even on Shabbos, but that only applies to chashuv clothing. It doesn't apply to underwear, it doesn't apply to a regular shirt, it doesn't apply to even to shoes, and it's interesting, I often get questions from women about this, and it's hard for me to judge. I can tell you, this is, when it comes to women's clothing, it's harder, at least to me, to sort of define what's considered chashuv and what's not, but I guess there's, again, like we said, there's some, there's some degree of subjectivity. Now, what about buying a suit? You want to buy a suit right now, but you're not going to wear it until after Tisha B'Av. So, originally the halacha was that you say the Shechayanu when you buy the new garment. The Maisa, the minhag at some point changed, that even those who do say Shechayanu on a new suit don't say it when they buy it, they say it when they wear it. So, if there's a great need, then one can be lenient to buy, in other words, the reason you want to buy the suit now, I'll get to deals in a moment, if there's a reason why you want to buy the suit dafka now, to wear it for afterwards, then there's room to be lenient. And also, another thing, the this minhag not to wear a new suit on Shabbos of the 3 weeks has a number of levels of chumras involved. Because first of all, you're anyway not saying Shechayonu. And even if you were saying Shechayonu, there are poskim that it's permissible on Shabbos. And so if somebody tells me, look, I don't have a Shabbos suit, and I just got a suit right now, can I wear it during the 3 weeks? I'll say yes, if you have your Shabbos suit, but good, you're right, it's time for a new one. So fine, so wait another couple of weeks before you wear your new one. But if you don't have a Shabbos suit, then it's important for you to present yourself looking like a mensch, and now you have a chance to have a Shabbos suit on Shabbos of the 3 weeks, where it's a double layer chumrah. I would say that's okay to be lenient.
But it's specific if you bought it before the 3 weeks.
No?
No?
No, I mean, it certainly makes it better. Yeah. Now, the same thing is brought in the poskim about a yurid, which in contemporary terms means if there's a good deal. So then also there would be, there's a reason to buy it now to make a good deal. That heter of buying clothing on a good deal does not apply during the 9 days, but it does apply during the 3 weeks, but we're going to get to that. We'll get to that soon. Now, finally, before we get to the 9 days, one more thing that's relevant to the 3 weeks is avoiding situations of sakana, of danger. So it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. So this is the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. Tzarich lizar in Siman Tov Kuf Nun Aleph. Tzarich lizar, that's chapter 551. Tzarich lizar miyudzayim b'tamuz HaTisha B'Av, for the 3 weeks one should be careful. Shalei lechichidi, not to go alone. Midalet shoyis atesh shoyis, from 4 hours into the day to 9 hours, which is, I guess, from approximately 10 o'clock till approximately 3 o'clock, that's fine, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, to 3 o'clock, to the midday, not to go alone, mishum shabahem ketev miriri shaylet, because then there's bad angels who are in charge. I don't know exactly how to translate that. It's also not so relevant lamaisa, because it's talking about being alone in a deserted place. So,
like
I mean, if you're going in the forest, so don't go to the forest during that time of the day alone. Also, you shouldn't hit your students in those in these times. So even
save them.
Even
And you can hit the teachers. It's perfect.
even in the time when it was considered the norm and even recommended that teachers should discipline by hitting the students, during the 3 weeks you avoid. Now, what's all?
God hate the child.
So what's this all about? So basically, the theme of all of this is to avoid during the 3 weeks things that are dangerous. Now. If it's the poskim also say that if it's a trip that's sort of just a pleasure trip, you should also avoid it. There's no prohibition against traveling. A pleasure trip we should avoid, but against traveling, you have to go from A to B. You want, to go and visit family, whatever. That's fine. It is brought down, and the Rabbi used to often tell people that if you're planning to travel in the 3 weeks, to at least start packing your bags before Shavasa B'Tammuz, like this, you sort of anchor it into before the 3 weeks. But again, avoid traveling just for the purpose of pleasure, and avoid things which are connected to danger. So you would say maybe, I don't know, even obviously dangerous things, you should never do dangerous things, but there's a certain level of risk, which, I don't know, you go speedboating or whatever, different types of things that people do, which are not considered dangerous, and there's and everything's control, whatever, but there's some degree of danger, so you should avoid them.
There's a measure of danger.
Exactly. All right. So okay, now we're coming on to the 9 days. So we already mentioned before, we diminish in joy, and we also mentioned that there's a prohibition in the week of Tisha B'Av, there's a prohibition to do laundry, and we also said that, so we're going to take that back all the way to the 9 days. Now, the Gemara says, we're not going to have time to go through this Gemara inside, there's a Gemara in Tainis Tav Chavtes Amud Beis, Tainis 29b, where it says explicitly that the prohibition to do laundry is not just to do laundry to wear it, but even to do laundry, just doing laundry in and of itself. Even if you're just going to leave it to wear after Tisha B'Av, is also forbidden. And it's not explicit in the Gemara, but it is explicit in the Rishonim that not only should you not be doing laundry, but you also should not be wearing freshly laundered clothing, right? So we don't do any laundry at all, and we don't wear freshly laundered clothing for the entirety of the 9 days from Rosh Chodesh Av until after Tisha B'Av. Again, this year there would be the leniency to do it immediately after Tisha B'Av for the sake of Shabbos. So you wouldn't, for Friday morning after Tisha B'Av, you still don't wear the freshly laundered shirt, but you could already be doing laundry to make sure that the whole family have enough laundry for Shabbos. And let me go, you see here I have about 15 bullet points to go through over here, and when I'm finished, I'll take questions. So Shulchan Aruch says that this applies also to towels, tablecloths, blankets, linens, all of those things should not be used freshly laundered during the 9 days. And the Ramah says that even, well, the Shulchan Aruch says the week of Tisha B'Av, but the Ramah of Ashkenazim brings it back to the 9 days, and he says you also, not only should you not do so yourself, you're not even allowed to have a goy do it for you. Now, if a person only has one beged, the person only has one garment to wear, so then he's allowed to wash it. You only have one shirt. Again, not very practical nowadays. I guess it could happen if a person's sort of traveling and his flight was canceled, so he's stuck. So if you only have one shirt, so then you're allowed to wash it in the beginning of the 9 days before the week of Tisha B'Av. But in the week of Tisha B'Av itself, no laundry at all. Now, the children, it's brought, clothing of young children, babies or even very young, toddlers who've dirt their clothes the whole time. One may do their laundry, but it should be done b'tzina, not in public. So at home it's fine, not in a laundromat. It's forbidden to wash or set a sheitel because, like we said before, a sheitel is not hair. A sheitel is a clothing. So you're allowed to cut it during the 3 weeks. So it's not a haircut, but you're not allowed to wash it during the 9 days because it's like doing laundry. Now, if you have clothing that has gotten stained in a way that if you don't wash it right away, it's going to ruin the clothing, either because it's a type of like an oil stain or something that if you don't wash or if you let it sit, it's going to ruin, or if it's maybe wet and it's going to get moldy and you don't have a way out of it, so then you are allowed to launder it. There's Achronim discuss whether or not it's permissible to polish your shoes during the 9 days, and I believe the consensus is that it's permissible to do for the sake of Shabbos, so before Shabbos of the 9 days. Nowadays it would be considered, you're going to wear the same shirt for 9 days, 9.5 days, that's already considered a bit crazy. So the eitzah that's given is that before the 9 days, you should wear each of your shirts that you want to wear for some period of time. How long exactly? Different shittas, different achronim give different recommendations, but one idea that I saw that makes sense to me is wear it for long enough that if somebody else would, if you would come into my wardrobe and wear a shirt, not during the 9 days, just randomly, and you wear a shirt. If you wear it for 2 minutes, okay, just put it back in the thing. If you wear it for half an hour, I might say, okay, stick it in the laundry, So wear it for an amount of time that it's not smelly or dirty, but it's taken off the sort of the freshly laundered thing.
I just have my dog run over everything.
Sorry?
I just throw it on the floor and have my dog run over everything.
Oh, so that's another idea that some poskim bring, that you could throw it on the floor. I still, some poskim say it doesn't mean on the floor on your carpet; it means on the floor in the street. But if you have your dog run over it, then that's good. But it's also important to remember because people forget about because it's not just your shirts; it's also your linen for your bed. Not to change the linen for your bed. And towels and all those things. A good example where you could use a Shabbos Yid is if you forgot to wear all your shirts before the 9 days. So until the week of Tisha B'Av, you could have a Sephardi wear it for you, because Sephardim don't start that until okay. Now, what about undergarments, underwear, undershirts, socks, and the like? So we do not permit to launder them, but we do permit to wear freshly laundered ones. Because that's considered something that's a necessity for everybody nowadays to wear fresh underwear on a daily basis.
So except for those few circumstances that you mentioned, there's no laundry at all during the 9 days.
Correct.
You can't even wash your underwear.
No, you don't wash your underwear. You do, but you can wear freshly laundered ones. Now, what if you mamish don't have anything to wear? All your clothing are smelly and stinky and dirty, and what do? By the way, there was one thing which I meant to say, which I thought I put in my bullet points. Maybe I did not. Can somebody give me a pen so I remember it? It's brought, what's it called? Spot cleaning. If you have a stain and you want, thank you.
Rabbi,
I got it. Thank you. Thank you. If you have a stain in one spot and you want to take like a Tide pen to wash off that stain in one spot, that's fine. Okay. So, if your mamas don't have anything to wear and everything's dirty, so you don't, some people don't have 9 changing of underwear, right? So what do? So if it's, so what I've seen the Achra is that if you're talking about underwear or possibly even a shirt, so then you can wash them until. And if you're not going to have enough to change into, and you're going to be smelly, then you can wash them until the week of Tisha B'Av. So on Friday, that means on the Friday of the 9 days, do all your laundry, wash all your underwear, and if necessary your shirts, and then hopefully you have enough to stretch it through till after the 9 days. But if you're not even going to have enough for that, meaning you don't even have 6 or 5, whatever it is this year, so then you should buy new ones. You should buy more underwear, and buying underwear in the 9 days itself. In such a case where your mamish don't have any, usually we don't allow any. In other words, buying. We're going to speak about this more in a moment. But buying new clothing in the 9 days is different than in the 3 weeks. In the 3 weeks, the reason not to buy new clothing was because you don't say shechayanu, and that only applies to suits and the like. In the 9 days, not buying new clothing is like doing laundry. If you're not allowed to take an old garment and make it fresh by washing it, then certainly you're not allowed to buy a fresh garment. So, but nevertheless, to buy, if your underwear if you don't have enough underwear to last you through, then you should buy new underwear in the week of Tisha B'Av rather than laundering it. If it's talking about your shirt you really shouldn't buy at all during the 9 days, and certainly a suit or whatever it is, to pants. And if your mamish only have one and it's dirty, so then you wash that single one. Wash it, and if you're able to do it without putting it in the washing machine, but just sort of spot cleaning the areas which need to be washed, then that's certainly better.
Is Tisha B'Av one of the holidays where you don't wear leather shoes to show?
Yes, I was going to mention that if you don't have non-leather shoes, you can buy them during the 9 days.
So, what you're saying is it's preferable to buy new underwear rather than to launder your old underwear.
Correct.
Okay.
I have not seen people be machmir with children. We don't do, again, in other words, to do the laundry, we only allow it for very young children who constantly soil their clothing. But to wear fresh clothing, I haven't seen that we should be machmir for children. If children can wear fresh clothing, that's what I've seen. Now, if you have a suit, if your Shabbos suit is dirty, and you need it, you're going to need it for the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av, and this year it's only 1 day, so then you are allowed to give it to the cleaners during the 9 days, and schedule to pick it up on Friday after Tisha B'Av. Now, what about a hotel, or you go to a mikveh, so they have fresh linen on the bed in the hotel, and you go to the mikveh and they have a fresh towel. So Lamaisa, the poskim seem to justify that in some level. It's unclear to me exactly how or why, but you don't see people being machmir to take their own towel, a dirty towel, to the mikveh. You go to the mikveh, you use whatever is there. You go to a hotel, you use whatever is there. But if you're in the hotel for multiple nights, you make sure no room service. You're not allowed to have them changing into fresh linen every day. And similarly, if you're hosting guests during the 9 days, you are allowed to give them a bed with fresh linen on it, again, because it's not considered respectful to give a guest during the 9 days, to give him a used thing. Now, what about during a sale? So I mentioned before that during the 3 weeks, you're allowed to buy clothing if it's a good sale. Now, during the 9 days, the heter of a sale doesn't apply, because here it's not just about buying a new thing. It's like laundry. You don't say that if it's cheap to do, if there's some sort of financial value in doing laundry during the 9 days, it's too bad. We don't do laundry during the 9 days. So if you don't do laundry, you certainly don't buy new clothing, even if it's a sale. However, I did see Pasum say that if there's mamish a major sale, and it's a major savings, then we would allow you to buy new clothing in the 9 days before Shavuot Shechabed, before Shabbos. But provided, and here there's a big distinction. Sometimes, for example, Prime Day, so it's before the 9 days. But sometimes you need something, and you're waiting for it to go on a deal. You're looking for a shirt, and you're waiting for Dan's Deals to post, 7 shirts for free, and then you're going to get them, right? And sometimes you don't really need it, but you see the good deal, and you're like, Geschmack a deal, I like, you convince yourself you're saving money. So that just because you see a good deal, we're not going to allow you to buy something in the 9 days. But if there's something that's taka on your list, the taka need to buy it, and the reason you haven't bought it yet is because you're waiting for a better price, and the better price comes up before in the 9 days before the week of Tisha B'av, then we'll say that's allowed. Now we mentioned already before that we don't do things which are distractions from the morning, unless they are the needs of the upkeep of the house. So painting your walls, that waits till afterwards. But sweeping, mopping, etc., we don't do. Landscaping. So I looked, I didn't see anybody talk, planting is brought in the Gemara, that we don't plant. But I think that the point is, we don't engage in simcha. I don't know, if you're a person who keeps your lawn kept and you have the guy come every week or every 2 weeks to mow the lawn, I don't think that you have to cancel him for the 9 days. If he's coming to start, planting your flowers and make your flowers just so, that you tell him, skip for this week. But just to keep the weeds down and to keep the grass in a normal length, that's I think can
Keep
be.
the city off your back.
I think that can be compared to
If it's over
to regular
8 inches,
housekeeping.
you have to cut it.
We do not buy anything. We don't buy. You could buy your regular groceries and things like that. You could buy, but again, things that are luxuries, gold, silver, fancy furniture, toys, all of those things, you don't buy during the 9 days. But here, if there's a good sale, then you could say you can. In other words, if there's an opportunity to buy, I don't know, games for your kids to keep them busy, and it's going to be much. So there you don't have. It's not like laundering. It's not clothing. It's other things. Other things where there's a good sale, and again, not just because you're looking to save money, but it's something that you actually need. So then we would say that it's not you're distracting yourself from the morning. You're not distracting yourself from the morning, but there's just an opportunity that's not going to be here later. So that would be fine. Okay. It's brought down not to do any sewing. Also, sewing is considered an activity that doesn't need to be done. No knitting. People knit for sport to keep themselves busy. Whatever. We shouldn't do that.
But how about repair, like sewing?
So repairing is fine. Repairing is fine. Certainly, if it's just sewing a button or something small, is fine. If it's maybe if it's something more, you're getting custom made, measured for a custom made suit, maybe not. But just that your button falls off or something rips and you need to sew it closed, that's not a problem at all. And then there's two more. We're already 10 o'clock. There's two more important things to discuss. One is meat and wine, and one is bathing, washing. So we're going to make it quick. But again, meat and wine. So it's brought down in the Gemara. It says you're not allowed to have meat and wine in the Suda. Obviously, in Tisha B'av you don't eat. But it's brought down that in the Suda Mafsekes, in the last meal before Tisha B'av, that's the strict halacha not to have meat and wine. However, the minhag to extend the prohibition earlier is brought down very, very early. The Rambam already brings that everybody forbids I'm sorry, the Rambam might be about Rechitza. Okay, I have to go through my notes here quickly. But basically, the minhag, the Aruch HaShulchan brings that it's if somebody eats meat during the 9 days, then it is a biblical prohibition because it's such a strongly anchored minhag that it's considered a biblically binding. Now, yeah, I want to point out, just like I said before about the music, that really we're never supposed to listen to music. So it's not like, we're forbidding it in the 3 weeks. The rest of the year is a concession. So the truth is that there's a similar thing about meat. The Gemara really says that really we should never be allowed to eat meat. So I mean that's the Gemara. It's different. It's a similar idea that it's kind of a concession the rest of the year that we do eat meat. Practically speaking, young children under the age of chinuch or 5 or whatever are allowed to eat meat. Also on Friday, if you put the kids to bed, if your Seder on Friday is you put the kids to bed before Shabbos, and before you put them to bed you give them some Shabbos food, that's fine as well, even if they're older than 5 or 6. And the minhag is that you don't eat anything for which you would wait 6 hours. So, for example, if you take a fleshik pan that's perfectly clean and make a scrambled egg in it, that's fine. But if you have, let's say, a deep fryer which you've used to fry schnitzel in it, then you should not use that oil during the 9 days. Even if you're just making French fries, you shouldn't eat that during the 9 days. There's the question also of Havdalah on Matzah Shabbos of the 9 days. it's brought to give it to a child, but it's challenging. You have to find a child who's the right age, who's understands to listen to Havdalah and to say Amen to the bracha, but he's not old enough that he should be required to abstain from wine because of the chinuch of Avela. So it's a 7, 8, 9, it's hard to know exactly, but if you don't have such a child available, then some people would say better to make Havdalah on beer, but I believe that the Chabad practice is that you make Havdalah on wine, you drink it, and that's it. Okay, the prohibition against wine applies to grape juice as well. Bathing. So the Gemara says, of course, on Tisha B'Av itself, we don't even wash our hands. The Gemara discusses not bathing on Erev Tisha B'Av. If a person actually has dirt, if you manage to get dirt on a part of your body, there's certainly no question that you're allowed to wash. In practice nowadays, so the Mishnah says in Brachas that Rabbi Gamliel was caught was observed, is perhaps a more respectful way to say it. We learned yesterday in Pirkei Avos, we mentioned in sport, one of the 48 things is gas libay b'talma. I forgot exactly the Lashon. And we saw yesterday that the Pharisee Yisrael says it means that the way you talk about them in the Torah that you're learning, you talk in a respectful way. Okay, so Rabbi Gamliel was observed by his students while he was sitting Shiva, that he was washing his feet. His feet or washing? Maybe he was washing his whole body. I don't remember. So they said, "What do you mean? Obviously in Shiva, not allowed to." So I said, "I'm istanis." Istanis. How do you say in English? Istanis.
Say again.
Istanis.
Istanis is a Hebrew or probably a Greek word, but it means that I can't. I need. For me, the bathing is not a luxury; it's a necessity. So nowadays, certainly if in the northern hemisphere where it's the summer and people sweat, and there's a degree of necessity to wash or bathe every day or every other day, however you say it. So I would say like this: children, there's no problem. Children can continue bathing as regular. But they should not go, that's bathing for their cleanliness or for their daily routine, but they should not go swimming. First of all, swimming in general, there may be some degree of danger, but it's widely accepted that no, we don't do any swimming at all during the 9 days. But what about adults showering during the 9 days? So the principle is you're allowed to wash with the measurements that are necessary for you to be clean, hygienic, not smelling, etc. So that what that means is you set the temperature of the shower it doesn't have to be cold, you don't have to be suffering, but it's not hot like you would usually shower in a hot, comfortable shower. You do it at the temperature where it's comfortable enough to go in there without the chill, warm, lukewarm, exactly how you define it. Again, we're not giving you exactly degrees, but it should be warm enough to be comfortable, but cool enough to not be sort of this relaxing rechitza experience. And also, if it works for you, that you're not like standing under the flow of water of the shower the whole time, but that while you're scrubbing your body, you stand outside of the water, and then you wash yourself, and then you just go in under the water to rinse yourself off, etc.
Well, a nice rubbing alcohol sponge bath works.
And another thing is, and this, I don't know, this is the way I personally feel about it. I'm open to being challenged on this. In the mikveh, I feel it's inappropriate to shower in the mikveh during the 9 days, because you could go into the shower briefly just to rinse yourself off, because before you go into the mikveh, if you don't rinse yourself off, then the mikveh gets dirty. But to stand in the mikveh and shower, as many people have the routine that their daily shower is in the mikveh, to me that feels inappropriate, because the rule is that you don't shower during the 9 days. Okay, you're sweating and you need it and this, so we make a concession and you're allowed to do it. But to do it in public, as if it's public policy that we're showering this week, that feels to me to be against the spirit of the law. And I'll just finish off just one more thing about babies, that I think that it's permissible for a baby to bathe is permissible even on Tisha B'Av. If you're putting the baby, as I said, we're not really going to talk halachas of Tisha B'Av, but if you're going to be putting the baby to sleep, and you always give the baby a bath before you put them to sleep, then you're allowed to do so on Tisha B'Av. Also, I saw some poskim say, you should put on a glove so your hands don't get wet, but I don't know if, strictly speaking, that's necessary. It's not your intention to wash your hands. Your intention is to bathe the child, and your hands get a bit wet In the interim, that's not a major deal.
Is a
Hasbe
niggun,
shalom, your hand
is
should
a
go
niggun
swimming.
use it?
Sorry. Yeah.
Is a niggun use it? Same-
Yeah, it applies to that's-
The words I'm thinking is squeamish. It might be like a
Well,
squeamish type
istiness?
of squeamish, squirmish, or maybe fastidious. Fastidious.
There's no good
It's
translation.
I can't think of any. It's
I
like
can't bury it around.
it's like a person that has a low tolerance for disgust, or
that's like 7 words.
they don't like they don't like to be dirty. They don't like to be uncomfortable. Or,
You mean